Hello, everybody. Welcome to our discussion of John Carpenter's Vampires, starring James Woods as himself.
I was kicking your ass back there. Did that give you wood? What?
Okay, I'm curious about something. Uh, were you, as a child, as avid of a Family Guy watcher as I was?
I thought if you were going to ask me that as a child, was I a particular fan of James Woods? And the answer was yes. Salvador, Once Upon a Time in America. When I wasn't watching SpongeBob, I was watching Videodrome. So yeah, I've
Okay.
grown up with a real fondness for James Woods. Yeah, sure, I was a Family Guy watcher, and I see where this is going. So
I just wanted to say, ahead of time, both James Woods on Family Guy and James Woods in real life have ruined James Woods for me. I don't take him seriously in anything that I watch because that's the version of James Woods that I saw before anything James Woods. I wasn't, uh, I'll say, fortunate enough to have a direct, you know, film critic in my life growing up to introduce me to some of the deeper cuts of what a child would be watching. So I didn't really get to see Once Upon a Time in America till I was a little older. Didn't get to see all these things, but
yeah,
somehow
to be
Family
clear,
Guy did end up on my TV.
I didn't discover James Woods really until I was old enough to be watching the type of film that he's associated with. If he has a family friendly content in his resume, I have not
No.
discovered it for myself.
So, heyday, you finally made it. How are things in the underworld?
Well, they're just fine. A little dark, a little gloomy, and as always, hey, full of dead people. What are you gonna do?
I think anybody who's interested in watching our discussion of it is probably gonna come at this from the angle that I come at this movie from, which is this is John Carpenter. This is his only successful movie of the 90s.
It's his last profitable film that he ever directed.
And it was coming off of a string of bombs. He's like Martin Scorsese in that more movies of his have failed at the box office. And if anything, that contributes to his mythic status, right? Like,
Yeah.
The Russo brothers make fun of Martin Scorsese because, most of his movies don't do well at the box office, but that's why we cherish him. He really beats the odds, and he's a real testament to, the perseverance of vision over, over industry politics and commercialism, right? And I think that's actually John Carpenter's story, even though he started out with the huge hit of Halloween, right? That's not the story of his career. I mean, this dude really had bomb after bomb, critically and commercially. Before this, what was he doing? He did the Village of the Damned remake. He did the Memoirs of an Invisible Man, which apparently was like the ugliest experience he's ever had, working with Chevy Chase. Almost made him retire early. He's always threatened to retire throughout like most of his career. Like,
Yes.
after every bomb or every, unpleasant shoot.
Well, I mean, Escape from LA was 96. I mean, this was just 2 years after that. Village of the Damned was 95. Let's see. I'm looking through his, of course, Memoirs of an Invisible Man.
Then before that, I think, there's In the Mouth of Madness, which I think was a modest hit, all things considered.
It's definitely become a fan favorite in the last few years among horror fans.
But
people really enjoy it.
But this movie, Vampire Dollar Sign, as I will call it, has not. I would argue this is the Saint Anger of the John Carpenter oeuvre. This is his only grindhouse movie. Like, this is the only sex, drugs, and rock and roll horror movie. You know, the man who famously started off being the anti-exploitation filmmaker with the tastefulness and the austereness of Halloween. You know, he steadily starts to embrace those splatter pack sensibilities until it kind of, you know, this is the nuclear version of that. I mean, is there anything in his filmography that competes with it?
I don't think before this, no. You know, arguably Ghost of Mars after this is definitely more of an acceptance of that sort of like, I wouldn't say like more grindhouse sensibilities, but it feels like selling out on all forms. This doesn't quite feel like that. There's still John Carpenter-ness about this movie. I did feel like the 90s, I don't know if it was, you know, just solely based off of the influence of guys like Tarantino, but I mean, like, watching John Carpenter sort of evolve within the 90s. I mean, there's a specific style that we associate with him in the 80s, even though, like, The Thing kind of might fall a little bit outside of that at times. You know, there's still, like, a style we can associate with him, especially in the early 80s. You know, people will often say, like, oh, well, Halloween 2 and Halloween 3, even though he didn't make those, they're very much John Carpenter-esque movies. They're very similar to something he would make.
You know,
right,
he did
and
sanction that buffoonery.
Yes, he did sanction that buffoonery. No one sanctions our buffoonery, unfortunately. You know, and then, like, even Prince of Darkness is very much shot like, you know, those movies are. The way that they're shot, the way that they infuse colors, the way that they sort of, like, tastefully infuse influence into the movie. I mean, they're not quite ripping off what came before it, but, you know, the influence is there. I mean, with the original Halloween, you see a lot of Black Christmas. With Prince of Darkness, you see a lot of, you know, like, you know, Italian horror. He infuses enough in there that you can see that he has influences, but not enough to be considered a straight ripoff like some other movies of, you know, basing off of his have done. You know, Friday the 13th is a good example of that.
This is a rare movie for him that you could accuse. I'm not accusing it, but people have accused it of trend chasing a very recent hit, which is From Dusk Till Dawn.
Right.
Now, I think if you make any vampire movie set in this kind of neo-Western style, that's like an inevitable comparison. There's really, that's the version of that style, From Dusk Till Dawn. It owns that. Everything else, I guess, will be in its shadow. But
right.
It's probably From Dusk Till Dawn that kind of lets this movie become a hit, because I think people really didn't get what John Carpenter was going for most of the time. People did not understand why he kept making these pivots, or what they were supposed to do with something like from Prince of Darkness. I know you're a fan of that movie. This man here is not. All right.
Oh, okay.
Who has
I didn't know that about you.
And does not like the middle chapter of the Apocalypse trilogy? That's this guy.
Hey, you know, I it's a weird movie. It's a weird movie, and I think, you know, like, when you look at John Carpenter as a whole, I never really realized it until the last few years. And I mean, even being a part of, you know, like 5 or 6 years ago, when I'm a part of, like, Facebook horror groups, right, and I'm in the trenches with horror fans, like, the guy can really do no wrong in those circles. You know, you have your haters, but for the most part, it's just kind of universal praise for the guy. And then you kind of talk to people who are just sort of more familiar with horror. You know, they're not real deep fans of it. And John Carpenter is, I mean, at times controversial for those kind of people. You know, looking at his body of work, I mean, some of them will go as far as to say, like, Big Trouble in Little China is the only movie of his that they think is fantastic. Some people will say that it's that movie, Escape from New York, and The Thing, and then they don't want to touch anything else in his filmography. You know, certainly nobody's throwing praise at something like Vampires for that I've seen as of late, but surprisingly, it's gotten a lot more love over the last few years. I mean, right now it's sitting at a 2.9 on Letterboxd, which is much higher than I expected it to be completely honest with you.
We've been getting a lot of 2.9s lately. I think we're hoping to be the bump that
to get the credit for raising it up. Yeah.
Sure. Now I have a really serious question for you, and it's something that just popped in my mind.
Okay.
Which Baldwin is in this movie? Which one is it? Is it Daniel? Is it
It's
Billy?
Daniel. It's Daniel
Daniel?
Baldwin. 100%. I put in my notes the combination of James Woods and Daniel Baldwin is despicable. So I would have looked it up. I have the I always have the letterbox handy, and it is indeed Daniel Baldwin playing Anthony Montoya.
Would you believe me if I told you that originally they wanted Alec Baldwin for this role?
I would believe anybody who told me that any Baldwin brother role was supposed to be Alex. Anybody. I don't care what the role is. We wanted Alec Baldwin, but
there's a roulette table somewhere in Burbank that has the Baldwin brothers mug shots on them. I'm sure they all have fucking mug shots, those pricks, and they just
Jesus Christ.
roll the circle, and sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you get an Alec, but you might get a Daniel. Oh my God. Daniel Baldwin is responsible for 2 stars being knocked off. I think anybody walking away from this, would give this 2 stars higher if they could have swapped this man out for any other actor in Hollywood, possibly.
It's also his second appearance on our show. He also featured very shortly in a movie where he was actually used the way he should be used. Nothing But Trouble, where he was thrown into a grinder, which was one of my favorite moments from any movie ever. At least one movie on this show knew how to use Daniel Baldwin.
It was nuts to watch him sexually harass the girl,
a catatonic vampire woman.
Well, I know her as obviously as Laura Palmer from Twin Peaks,
right?
Bringing it back to David Lynch, who we talked about not too long ago.
Yeah.
This is the only actress, the only role outside of Twin Peaks that I've seen from this actress, and my God, did I feel bad for her.
Honestly, I felt bad for a few people in this movie, if I'm being honest. James Woods not being one of them. We have, of course, Cheryl Lee, who we talked about, but fucking Shang Tsung's in this movie, dude. They don't do anything with him in this. We covered on our Patreon, I don't think it's out available publicly as of yet, but we covered Mortal Kombat from 1995. 3 years before this, we get arguably the screen-stealing performance of Shang Tsung. And he doesn't do anything in this. They don't use him at all. He's just there. And then we have Mark Boone Jr., some people may not know Mark Boone Jr., but we know him very well from our favorite movie.
Yeah, they will have
Halloween 2.
They will have seen him in Batman Begins or maybe Memento. Great character actor, always loves seeing
Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, of course.
Yeah, I think we covered that. I was just trying to prove
above the
to
law
our viewers that we have seen other movies outside of Halloween 2. I just need you to know that for the record.
I want people to think that's the only movie I've ever seen.
Yeah. Between that and your Cubs cap, I'm sure that makes you an instant Mr. Popular.
Oh, dude, I have so many friends. But I want to ask you something as we kind of get a little bit into this movie. We've we kind of brushed over the cast and such, and obviously James Woods. Vampire movies as a whole. I mean, it's kind of a subgenre. I mean, there's vampire movies that fit into horror. There's vampire movies that fit into comedy. Your Buffy the Vampire Slayer from like '92 in the comedy side. You have action vampire movies like Underworld. Are you a vampire movie guy? Like, do you tend to like vampire movies? I know you're a creature feature guy, but you seem to kind of, if I were to guess, you seem like the kind of guy that would lean more towards the like original Universal era of the vampires and not really anything too far after. I mean, Hammer horror maybe, but
I'm pretty neutral on vampires. I mean, they look just like people, so there's really no kind of instant reaction I have to vampires, unless you go all out and you make them one of those really gnarly bat monster things that you would see in 80s movies like Fright Night, which that's definitely my favorite way to do vampires. But casting the bad guy from Karate Kid 3 to play somebody who should be, attending a Slipknot concert not, trying to take over the world or whatever the hell. That's not my favorite way to go as far as, bringing the vampire to the screen. Really, this isn't about vampires. This is about vampire hunters. These are the stars. You got James Wood, the great vampire hunter. What's his name? Jack Raven, Jack Penguin, Jack Crow. His name is Jack Crow.
Oh, Jack Crow. Yeah. Jack Crow.
Question for you.
Oh.
Did these vampires ever scare you?
Not necessarily in execution, but I want to praise something that this movie does, and I based on my understanding, I think this is something that they took from the book that this is very loosely based on. I say very loosely based on because I feel like a lot of the stuff that I've read about the book, I haven't read the book, but I heard it doesn't seem like they really took it. It's not a one-to-one translation, but from my understanding, one of the things that they did take was this sort of like, in a way, like telepathic connection between the vampire master and no. Let me tell you why I liked it. Okay, I like it in principle. I don't like it in execution too much, but the idea that like, let's say like opening of the movie, right? Where the vampire hunters come in and they kill one vampire. The idea that now all the vampires that this dude has bit knows what happened and where they are is a really genuinely scary concept. Like the concept of like, oh yeah, we got one of them, but how many more are on their way, or how many more are here that now know exactly where we are and what we've done? The idea of that is very scary and could have been done in a very scary way. Do I think any vampire in this movie is scary? I think I'd probably get nightmares first from what we do in the shadows. I especially from our main man. Is it? I think it's pronounced Jan Valek or Jan Valek, whatever they call him. Our master vampire of the movie could not have been less scary. If he was shopping for creepy paper in the convenience store, in the local grocery store.
Let me tell you what's scary to me. This is something that really keeps me up at night. Okay, the thought of James Woods shooting a harpoon into my shoulder so that I can be dragged out into the sunlight.
They were scarier, yes.
Yeah, they were scarier. I mean, they were worse people. Arguably,
yeah, I think so. But I will say, though, really cool idea for a vampire hunter, I think. The idea that, like, they're just, like, violently yanking them into the sunlight, and the effect was really cool.
There are a couple
I enjoyed
pretty
that.
neat ideas. I'm going to challenge, I think, an idea that people have about this movie, and maybe it's an impression that we've been giving about this. James Wood saves this movie. I would not have nominated this or cared to strike up a conversation about vampire $sign if not for the presence of James Woods, who, let's be clear, he's a great actor. He doesn't get cast anymore because who would want to work with the man? I've never seen anything of his that is even less than stellar, aside from maybe his unfortunate performance as Rudy Giuliani. Check that movie out if you really want nightmares. Yeah.
I think he both saves and kills the movie for me at the same time. And here's why. I can appreciate camp value. I think he brings a lot of it to this movie. I think his line delivery is one of the most entertaining things about any 90s John Carpenter movie.
And line improvisation, because
I
doubt most of this was in the script.
From what I understand, most of his lines in this movie, he had an agreement with John Carpenter to do two takes that they liked about them. One where he said the line exactly as it was written, and another where he added his own improv and did it his own way. And from my understanding, almost none of the scenes of his are what was written in the script, that they're all what he improv. And I have to give him credit for that. I mean, I may not like James Woods, and I don't. I don't like James Woods at all, actually. But he adds an entertainment value to this movie that is extremely high. My big issue with it is this movie had a chance to be better than that. You know, this movie had a chance to be better than just a laugh at you movie.
No, I love that. Let me tell you why. This is the one, well, not the one, but this is a John Carpenter movie that people consider a minor classic of sorts that they cannot take seriously. I think I have made myself clear on how I feel about the cult of personality and the worshiping of John Carpenter. I think it is. I think it's toxic. I hate stan culture in general, and I don't think we need to.
I would agree.
Cherish his filmography as much. In fact, I'm sure he agrees with me because I think he made this movie in defiance of that. He did not want to make a good movie. He wanted to make a throwback to monster movies that he grew up with. He wanted to make a drama
and to the
movie.
Westerns that he grew up with.
And the Westerns,
guy got into filmmaking to make Westerns, and this is the closest he ever got.
He always wanted to make Westerns, and I think that's something that's been a really interesting inspiration for him, right? Because he always wanted to make them, but never could make them. So he had to kind of reverse engineer Westerns in different genres. Right?
Yeah.
Escape from New York, this movie, and it's that inspiration that I think really distinguishes it. It's more of a Western than From Dusk Till Dawn. I would argue that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's things that help From Dusk Till Dawn feel a little bit more like a Western. But I would agree that, especially like from what influences he did take, I would agree with that. I want to ask you though, would you agree that this movie's value is in like its entertainment and campiness, and not so much in the cool ideas that, I mean, like, I know this movie had a lot of cool ideas, and I say it has a lot of it had a lot of potential to be something better. But like, are you one of the people who's taking this seriously at all? Like, I just cannot take James Wood seriously. Okay, that's what I thought you were saying.
And there's an art to this tone that they're going for. It doesn't always work. I mean, I think when this movie goes mean-spirited, it gets ugly. And that's really any scene with Daniel Baldwin. I think I've made my feelings about the man pretty clear.
Yeah.
His oafishness really contrasts well with James Wood. It shows you like, oh, it does take like a very skilled actor to pull this off and not be unwatchable. Because James Wood is a skin-crawling person in real life, but he has the talent to turn that into something very magnetic. And we do need actors like that. We can't get rid of them. So that's where cancel culture ends for me. Like, if we get rid of the James Woodses, we might be left with Daniel Baldwin's, and I can't accept that. So,
but I've heard people, especially recently, I've heard people say that like Vampires is one of their top 10 vampire movies, period. And I hear that, and I'm like, I grew up, like, once I was getting into horror. When I say I grew up in my horror growing up, starts when I was probably like 12 or 13. I was pretty late to the party, even though I started in horror at about 9 on AMC. My real dive into horror started about 13. There were infamous movies that I knew not to watch. When people would tell me about John Carpenter, they'd tell me about Halloween, they'd tell me about The Thing, they would say, stay away from Ghosts of Mars and stay away from vampires. Those were the two that I heard. Over movies like Village of the Damned, which I don't...
Village of the Damned. That's the thing. People actually saw this movie. Like, it made money.
Yeah, yes, that's true. Now, Village of the Damned... I mean, I'm surprised that hasn't been on the show yet from either us or somebody else. I'm surprised nobody's brought it here.
It would take somebody who cares enough about that movie.
That's very fair.
Find me one person who wants to talk about that movie for an hour and a half. Also, that's the movie that paralyzed Christopher Reeve, so I don't want nothing to do with it. It didn't paralyze him. It was the last movie he shot before
just slandering.
But I'm gonna charge it with that crime anyways, just because.
Damn.
Bad juju.
Well, I mean, that's the movie that put Luke Skywalker in a horror film. So Oh well.
He's been in a horror film. Didn't you see The Last Jedi? Boom.
Cheers, my friend. Cheers, my friend. Cheers, my friend. I did. It was her. It was very scary.
Yeah, that scene where
Um,
he milks that alien cow thingy, it terrified me.
God, we are
Sorry.
getting into deep waters with sequel talk. No. All right. So I do want to say. I do want to say about vampires. Do you agree with my assessment that there is maybe an alternate universe, or there is maybe a version of this movie that could have turned out as an actual, to be taken seriously vampire movie, or do you think this is always going to be a campy, not to be taken seriously James Woods
I'm
fest?
saying I don't want that to exist.
So you would rather it be the way that it is. You think
Yes,
Vampires works better the way that it does.
I do. Well, I think it
Okay,
stands out because of the approach that they took. I mean, we have movies that are perfect examples of what you're talking about. I would argue Underworld is that to a lot of people. I would argue From
Underworld is
Dusk Till
great.
Dawn, it's kind of tongue in cheek and spots, but it's like that's a movie with some pretty prestigious players in it, and I think everybody is pretty proud of that film. It's elevated beyond a drive-in movie. No, no, no. We need a drive-in movie. We need like a late night. And I'm not talking so bad it's good. And that's the thing. It's a very hard tone to nail down because there is craftsmanship. Okay, this is still John Carpenter
Right.
he before he like decided that he was not going to care. He was going to only care about not caring moving forward.
Yeah.
This is him still wanting to prove that he can still make a hit. He's still got gas in the tank. And he does. I mean, that's why I say this is a better Western than From Dusk Till Dawn, because it just like heat waves emit from the screen in this movie. Like he really captures that locale, but he still got that John Carpenter Panavision, gleam to it. So I could turn off the music, although I would miss out on that sweet score. There's some nasty bad boy behavior that I don't sanction. Really, it comes down to some unfortunate casting choices for me. I think if they recruited the right people, this would have played kind of like perfect for me. Everything would have tracked. Like if you got a real rapscallion to play the Daniel Baldwin role,
Who from the time do you think would have been good in that?
Alec. There's a reason they went after Alec.
Yeah, but let's just pretend. Let's just pretend no Alec. Who else?
I don't know. Give me Steven. Give me Billy.
No, not another Baldwin. Look,
all right,
let's just
sorry.
be real.
Maybe I'm
None
being
of
lazy.
none of the other Baldwins should have ever been. I mean, like, look, we're talking about people who should have had the same success level as like a Frank Stallone, and if for some reason they keep getting put in shit. There's
They've
a
gotten
reason Frank
lucky.
Stallone's not in anything else. He's not good. Neither are any of these other Baldwin brothers.
Uh, yeah. Who could you have gotten to play this part? I mean, I'm trying to put on my '90s brain, trying to remember like who was hot in 1997 that would have slummed it to play this type of character.
By the way, I think this is the third movie that came out the year that we were born that we've covered. This is a
Oh,
'98
that's
Godzilla
98.
and Halloween H20. I think are the
Well,
only.
of those three, this is definitely my favorite.
Really? Okay,
Oh
so
yeah.
I'm gonna have to hear more about that because I'm gonna be honest. I've come into this episode on the fence of where I'm going to land.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited to see if you're able to push me over one way or if my own brain's gonna push me over one way. So we'll
I'm gonna
see.
shove you. All
Oh,
right.
you'll shove me. Holy
Yeah.
shit. Let's
It's
see.
gonna be a tug of war. I don't have like a strong case for this movie being uh, a legitimate enterprise that people really need to watch and give a chance. I can only give you my personal fondness for the same types of movies that John Carpenter is taking inspiration from. Like, if you want the 90s equivalent of a Hammer horror movie, I'm not sure where else you're going to find it.
I mean, yeah, I mean,
And remember the context that this was released in. Like, this is like the scourge of the Scream wannabes. Like, this is TV actors, Teen Vogue cover people remaking movies, or this is the era of the poster with all the actors' faces on it. Like, I know we're in a bit of a poster epidemic right now. Okay, you see movie posters.
no, but I know what you're talking about though. You're talking about that, like, like in H20 or The Faculty, or
just
Phantoms.
barely photoshopped Josh Hartnett's face.
Yeah,
A little pixel next to this Michael Myers mask, and you would be lucky if you got the mask on the poster at all. Like the Scream posters, it was just a knife. Like we weren't supposed to know that Ghostface was back.
I will say this. People often shit on me for my opinions on Scream. I'm just not the biggest Scream guy. I think it's probably one of those movies that I just, by the time I had finally gotten to see Scream, I'd actually gotten around to see it. I had seen so many of its clones that I just got sick of that style. And even though I've been able to warm up to some movies that have come out in that era, the one thing that I can appreciate is what you just said there, that this came out in the Scream clone era. I mean, that was from like what? Probably Scream came out in 96, right? So 96 to like 02?
I would argue House of a Thousand Corpses. Whatever you want to say about that movie's strengths or weaknesses, it did end that era.
Yeah, so like around like so that was like what? That movie actually released in like 03. It was so yeah, I appreciate this movie for existing within that time period, but not taking any influence. I mean, you can't even say that this took any influence from Scream. It doesn't feel like it came out in that era.
Scream. Well, it's self-aware in that you can see behind the film that you can tell that there is a wink and a nod from the filmmakers, but they don't ask the actors to articulate that on screen. Like James Woods doesn't tell you the rules to survive a vampire movie.
Yeah, this came out like, I feel like this movie feels like a movie that came out like 4 years earlier than this. Like if I was expecting, actually during the rewatch, like I didn't remember when this came out. And in my head, I just kept thinking like, oh, this movie came out in like 94, 95. Like just around that time period that like, that movies were still original for until, like that's exactly what I was thinking, is like, this must be pre-Scream. And that's what I was thinking of when I was watching it. To find out that it wasn't was refreshing, but it wasn't something that like actually I felt like I appreciated. I just went, oh, okay, it came out in 98. It's later than I thought. So I can appreciate it for that.
It sounds like you struggle for other things to appreciate about
because
this magnificent movie that I've brought before you. What about all the scenes where James Woods beats up the priest? What about all those scenes?
I still just have an issue with our master vampire character. I watched a couple of reviews before doing this, and I just like to see, what do other people think about this. I read some reviews on Letterboxd, I watched some reviews, and on YouTube I saw a couple talking about how like good the guy was, and like how they loved him as a villain, and how they thought that they bought into it, and I just don't understand it. I thought it was horrible. There were screens where he was like screaming, and it was just like, what are you doing?
Another way this movie benefits from time, I think, here's a reason why people have softened up to it. Okay, 3 words: Edward and Bella. Twilight has given people some rose-tinted glasses when it comes to vampire media. So like, no, this is not an intimidating villain. He's not a cool villain. He's not an interesting villain. I I think the movie's violence is really kind of tamed by just the presence of this of this man with his jet black locks blowing in the wind as he tears Mark Boone Jr. apart. But
Yeah.
at the same time, right, these vampires don't sparkle. They exist for only the purpose that I think people think vampires should exist, which is to hunt and to kill and dress in leather and have open chests and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. As soon as I started rewatching this, I was like, have you seen the TV show What We Do in the Shadows? Not the movie, but the TV show?
No.
Okay, there's a main vampire with long hair. His name constantly escapes me. He's absolutely hilarious in the show. I absolutely recommend the show. I think it's incredible. It's so funny.
Is he the one played by Matt Berry?
No, Matt Berry is in the show, and he is the best part of the show. But this guy is also
the best
great.
Part of anything he's in.
Thank you, Matt Berry. Okay, we are deviating from vampires for just a moment to praise Matt Berry, because that guy, I think, is one of the funniest human beings on the planet. I think he is consistently great in everything. His voice is perfect. And I will not let anybody convince me that Matt Berry is not a national treasure.
I think he is the British
an international treasure.
I think he's the British Jack Black in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I could see that.
I think their infectious charm, their perfect straight-faced goofiness, and their musical talents really make them great parallels.
Yeah, I found out that he was part of the theme for I think like Dancing with the Stars or something. I didn't know he was that like musically involved.
Yeah, he's musically gifted. Have you watched his show Toast of London?
That's not the show where he does like where he's like a voiceover artist, right?
It is.
Oh, okay. I've only seen clips of the show where he's like yelling at Clem Fandango.
Clem Fandango, can you hear me?
Shut the fuck up, Clem Fandango.
Watch it.
Okay.
It. He does an original song every episode. So
okay, that's cool.
It'll give you a great understanding of his talents. Okay. Maybe we should go back to talking about vampires now.
We should. This is about vampires. I do want to ask, what do you have left to say about vampires? I mean, I know this hasn't been the longest recording as of yet, but I don't really know where to go with this right now.
Oh no. Oh no. Let's really put this in the context of John Carpenter's career. Like, what do you think this represents? Is this maybe a last gasp for John Carpenter's career as a hit maker? Is it like, some people think that his career was really just winding down before this? There wasn't really going to be a chance to turn that ship around. Other people think, this movie was a hit. Critics actually seem to enjoy it. Gene Siskel, of all people, gave it a great review. Thought James Woods gave like one of the best performances of his career. So there was like encouragement for John Carpenter after this movie. I'm just wondering, could he have come back from that with this movie? Because some people think it's like a final nail in the coffin.
It's a difficult question to answer, because I think when the era of movies ended that fit John Carpenter as well as they did, I think it became harder for him to make movies. Honestly, I think he would have had more chance. I think he'd have more of a chance succeeding making movies like he used to today than making, than taking chances in, in his career like he did in the 90s. I mean, arguably you could say that the movies, from the 90s into the 2000s, even into the 2010s when he did The Ward, like those are chances. I mean, he's not playing it safe. He's not doing movies exactly the way that he used to do. He's seeing a grander vision. He's working with bigger budgets. When he's not working with bigger budgets, he's trying to do bigger things in the movies. I think honestly, I don't think he could have come back until the nostalgia for 80s movies is as high as it is right now. Like, it's not right now as in like it's at its peak right now, but I mean, for the last several years, people have been praising the hell out of movies from the 1980s. And I feel like that's where his style was at its strongest. Maybe not his direction. I mean, you could argue, a lot of people say now that The Thing is his best movie. I know that was in the 80s, but most people, I feel like, off the rip know him for Halloween, no?
Well, it depends, right? It depends on who you ask. You know, before 2010, I would have bet that people knew him more for maybe Escape from New York, or I think there were some movies of his that at the time represented bigger chapters in his career that now are eclipsed for the love of Halloween. Like
I know my dad, when I bring him up, will say Big Trouble in Little China.
Big Trouble in Little China. Maybe
Yeah.
They Live. Yes, I mean, I think he's always been defined by horror, but I thought that his biggest hits were outside of that genre for a while. But people have, people are always rewriting history or reevaluating history. So I used to think of him as a more adaptable guy. I think he tried to prove that, just didn't work out at the time. But even in this one, gross little vampire movie, you can see all of those influences that he could have doubled down on if given the chance. He could have made a Western. He could have made an action movie. This is more of an action movie than anything else.
I honestly, I mean, like, I'm kind of surprised that he's not. I'm kind of surprised that he hasn't come back to make something in the last, I don't know,
He's
6
done.
years.
No, he's done.
And I know it's because of how he feels about movies, but it's like the way that people get movies made now. Like, it feels like it's not exactly the same. Mostly because of how things will live on the internet or grow on the internet and things like that. But the way that people are making movies now is very and I don't know if this is a hot take, but it's kind of reminiscent of how horror was when John Carpenter ended up making Halloween. I mean, like, horror is not in the same place, but you're seeing the rise of these independent horror movies to a point that we've never seen it before. I mean, Terrifier is the biggest example that I can think of where it's like made for a very low budget comparatively, gets released into theaters, and not only does it succeed enough with horror fans, but it blows up. People are talking about it on Good Morning America, and then these new Winnie the Pooh movies, they have a whole universe of horror movies that they're going to make out of this.
I disagree with you on one crucial thing, which is I don't think having a hit like Terrifier opens up the gates to other opportunities like it did. I mean, off of the strength of Halloween, The Fog, and off of those hits in horror, John Carpenter got to make Escape from New York. He got to make Starman. In Little China, and I just
it doesn't allow for a branch out like it used to, I don't think. But the branch outs still do exist today out of horror, not necessarily from the indie horror making side, but like even independent filmmakers at this point can make a good profit in their movies. They don't have to spend a whole lot of money. I mean, hate to go back to the guy, we do it every episode, but Rob's a good example of that. I mean, 31 is not a beloved movie, but guess what? He made money off of 31. He crowdsourced that movie, and he made money off of it. He made money off of 3 from Hell.
Yeah, but I think he's also a good example of just how hard this business is on its directors. I mean, he at one point, had the keys to the kingdom. He was working on huge IP, and then now he has to, for that he had to crowdsource, and then, he got the Munsters, but he couldn't get it into theaters. He had to release it on Netflix.
Let's be real. We covered the Munsters on the show, and I like the Munsters, but like he barely got. I mean, he got it, but he barely they barely paid enough for this movie to be made.
Exactly. And that's even with
Yeah.
the sacred IP. But this is a movie, Vampires, that is lost in time. Like, this is like a movie that has nothing to do with any of the trends that we are talking about. It is, and this sounds like a strong word for a movie that, isn't it's not a gift from God, but it still feels like a miracle to me that a movie like this got made when it did by a man who did not have a lot of influence, at the time. People say you're only as good as your last movie. His last movie was Escape from LA. And, the name John Carpenter just didn't carry a lot of weight after that, unfortunately. And that's a movie I would nominate for this show because I adore that movie. Not a lot of people do. Even now, people have
It actually has the same rating as this on Letterboxd.
That's surprising. I feel like people have not softened up to Escape from LA. It's kind of the "you ruined my childhood" thing. Like, oh, I thought Escape from New York was the most badass movie ever. Then you made it a total joke, man. Or maybe the movie about a guy named Snake who has an eye patch and has to save a British American president. Maybe that was actually more tongue in cheek than you remember. I don't know.
I think that's part of the revisionist talk about John Carpenter, though. I mean, like, let's not forget, like, I used to hear all the time as a youngin about how there was this bad because I grew up a wrestling fan, not because I grew up around horror movies, but I used to hear all the time about how there was this terrible string of Roddy Piper horror movies, and they would tell me about They Live and what is it, Welcome to Frogtown or something.
Hell Comes to Frogtown.
Hell Comes to Frogtown. That's right. Great. All movies I would agree now are fantastic, but like, when you look at it, like, people would call They Live like a schlocky, crappy horror movie, and it's at a 3.8 on Letterboxd now. Village of the Damned, people would consider a bad horror movie. It's at a 2.8. It's relatively barely available for our show. Escape from LA and Vampires, both 2.9s. Ghosts of Mars, I would think would be at like a 1 from how people talk about that movie. 2.4. So even his weaker movies are higher than weak movies of other directors that are, some of them are probably better quality. Do you think I mean, I know you talked about the romanticization of it and how stan culture, and you don't agree with it, and you don't really agree with how people sometimes look at John Carpenter, but is there a value that a director can always keep no matter the type of movie that they put out? Like, like, is his legacy that sustained from The Thing and all those things?
I've heard people say about other directors, like, oh, they made so-and-so. So, like, literally anything they say, anything they make. I heard somebody say, and I have to reference we're going to talk about something else for a second. Okay. John Carpenter said that he thought Oppenheimer was just okay. He didn't get the hype. Cool, whatever. Really, I don't have any interest in what he thought of the movie Oppenheimer. It certainly is not something I like carry with the weight of,
Yeah, like, who cares what John Carpenter has to say about
who
that?
I'm supposed to revere and care about. It's just, that's John Carpenter's thoughts. Then somebody said, tongue in cheek, I know, but it really did bother me. Like, oh, if John Carpenter said that about a movie I loved, that it was just okay, I'd be reevaluating all of my life decisions.
Over an opinion.
Over an opinion, because the stan culture is so intense. And I understand this because, these directors, I guess, are like, are martyrs, right? Saint John, Saint Martin, fighting the good fight of cinema against the Goliath of the studios. So, we elevate them to these kind of like deities, and they can do no wrong. And that's very different than how people talked about it back then. Like, John Carpenter used to be a guy who had a lot of good movies and a lot of bad movies. Martin Scorsese used to be, he had a lot of great movies. Then he had some, he had some years in the wilderness. Steven Spielberg, great movies, bad movies. And the baseline for what even constitutes a bad movie, I'm realizing we're kind of contradicting the ethos of this show, but I'm just saying there are, like, you can say that you think a movie is bad. It's okay. That is not trying to besmirch a director, tear down their legacy. Like Wes Craven, perfect example. hugely important figure, as important to horror as John Carpenter. He made bad movies, and he would be the first to admit that. If I see somebody trying to tell me that Deadly Friend is that's actually a great movie, like people do not get it or people didn't appreciate it at the time, I don't know what I would do with that opinion. I would accept it, but don't try to expect other people to kind of follow suit just because you frame it as this obvious thing that everybody with a brain should be able to recognize, which is how film criticism goes now.
I think both the world of like Stan, I think it's so weird, like, and I've always thought this, like celebrity culture or like Stan culture and how people treat, like, these are just, this just a person who's good at something. Like when I put it into context, it's like, imagine a dude who's like, everybody kind of knows that person who's like a whiz at something, like maybe a guy who just by listening to your AC unit, he knows what's wrong with it. You're not going to follow the guy to every AC job and watch him do it and go, oh my God, he's the greatest ever. Will you, sign my wrench? I don't know. Like, you're not going to do that. And the fact that people, I understand that it's different when you're talking about something like movies, which is very personal for some people. I understand why movies are so personal for people. But at the end of the day, both the culture around celebrities and the culture around how people treat movies is so incredibly difficult to navigate that I don't even really like talking about movies with people anymore. Like, having the show is a great thing for me because it gives me a chance to talk about movies and not have to worry about you looking at me and telling me that you're going to carpet bomb my house because I like or don't like a movie.
Which is something I've thought, but thankfully I've never said.
But that's the thing. Like, everybody has felt like, oh wow, you really hate that movie. Like, I've had somebody told me that Empire Strikes Back is one of the worst movies they've ever seen after I told them that I thought it's my favorite movie. And they're completely entitled to that opinion. Am I going to think, like, how could they possibly think that way? Yes. The whole point of our show is about differing opinions, right? I just don't understand how anybody could get that defensive. Like, watching Vampires for this episode, I could never imagine taking an opinion that is, this is the worst movie I've ever seen, and this director should never direct anything again. And on the opposite, I could never, ever picture me saying, John Carpenter made this, so I don't care, it's great.
Or reversely, when you do look up to these people, like in a God tier way, then you can feel really betrayed if they make a movie that disappoints you. We've seen those expectations blow back a number of times, and I would argue John Carpenter probably went through a period like that. In fact, critics at the time, for a long time, said, "How could John Carpenter, the man who made Halloween, make a movie as trite as Christine, as exploitive as Vampires, as it was like, how could you have gone from giving us this to this?" That was probably the consensus about him for a number of years. And I think that really embittered him because he doesn't think of himself that way. He's I've criticized him a couple times, but I can never call him pretentious. He's anti-pretensions.
Well, look, and at the end of the day, he's, no matter what he's done in the film world, I'm sure he has a lot of valuable pointers, and if he's giving somebody pointers as a director or as a mentor, like, that's great. But he's just a dude with an opinion, and he's just a dude who's doing his job. I mean, it might be a job that we all, some of us in the film world aspire to, but I can guarantee no matter what you do, you've had a bad day at work. And that doesn't mean that he's the worst filmmaker. That doesn't mean he's the best filmmaker. That just means he's a dude who just does work.
Part of being an interesting or a unique person means having opinions or having thoughts that really clash with ours, right? Like, if we agree with everything he thought or everything whoever else thought, that would not make him a unique individual. So it's like, me agreeing with everything he says or thinks is not honoring that. It's kind of spitting in the face of the individualism behind what makes a great artist. Another thing, like Quentin Tarantino, who, I mean, we're talking now about 2-time Academy Award winner, guy who made Pulp Fiction and, really changed the film game industry wide.
Yeah. Genuinely one of my favorite directors. And I mean that.
Yeah. He thinks that the remake of Psycho is better than the original.
Yeah.
Great. Good for you, Quinn. I'm so glad that we have somebody with your brain around. You think like nobody else does. That does not make you right. Or at least it means that does not mean I have to agree with you, even though Quentin Tarantino knows more about film than I or any other single individual could ever dream of.
And that's the thing, man. Like everybody's brain's gonna take in the information that they get differently, and to think that anybody is a be all end all. In the wrestling world, we have a guy like this. Just because he has been around it for years and he writes about it and he covers it in news, people take his opinion as gospel. And it really bothers me in that world and in here in the film space, because it's like, just because a critic says a movie is bad doesn't mean it's bad. And we all know that. Like, as a whole, I think collectively, we're at a point in time where people will look at critic reviews, but most of the time, if they want to see a movie, they're just going to see it. Even if the critics say it's bad, just because the critics say it's bad, that doesn't mean that, right? But then, if their favorite celebrity says the movie's terrible, why is that any different?
Your favorite celebrity is that cool friend that you want to impress.
Bro, I don't have a single friend that I want to impress as enough to not do something I want to do.
Yeah.
And not one. And if that's how you're living your life, I'm very sorry. And you know what? And I want to give a movie like Vampires credit, right? Because it was a movie that critics spit on for the most part. It was a movie that audiences spit on for the most part. And I hope that if somebody really does feel that, I may have said earlier, about how there are people who think this is a top 10 vampire movie. Look, if I really sat down and looked at it, I don't think it would be there for me. And I'll raise a question similar to that in a few minutes here, but I'm so glad people exist that think that. Film would be so, just boring if somebody's favorite movie wasn't Birdemic. You know what I mean? I want people to love things. Go into movies wanting to love them, and you will have a great experience watching almost everything.
Yeah. Any movie has an actual devoted fan. Maybe not a fan base, but for every mind that creates a movie, there's going to be a mind that will be an audience to it. I really
exactly.
There are even people who like my movie, of all movies, and I can't,
because your movie's awesome.
I can't sanction that buffoonery.
I can absolutely sanction it. By the way, The Curse of Professor Sardonicus available now to purchase online
on Tubi. It's free, you idiots.
And to stream on Tubi. Yeah. Go to our website, notthatbadpod.com, for a link directly to Tubi to watch that movie. Don't even have to search.
Before we really go all out with the whoring, we should probably wrap this up and give people our final thoughts on vampires, even though it feels like we talked less about vampires than
that's difficult.
Really anything else. But all right,
I do want to raise something before we do our final verdicts.
Okay.
So we've heard somebody call this a top 10 vampire movie. Before we even say how we think about this, we both are more casual. I'd say you're probably more into the vampire genre than I am. That's just a principle. I think
as a whole,
I think pretty much everybody is, to be honest.
See, I think monster movie is its own genre. That's not a subgenre of horror. That's its own genre. And vampire movies are a subgenre of that. So and then I'm a fan of the genre.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of vampire movies.
I am much less into vampire movies than most people. I would say I'm under the average for people who like vampires. Is this a top 10 vampire movie for you, if you want to think about it? And I'm curious to hear if you even have 5 vampire movies that you'd say are your favorites.
Well, the interesting thing is that there was a real golden age of vampire movies just before this, right? The Lost Boys, Near Dark, Fright Night, probably my favorite. And some others that I'm not even thinking of. Those are just off the top of my head. So, the 1980s produced I think, enough vampire movies for a top 10 list, but throughout the history of cinema, I don't think this really cracks the top 10 for me. It's in my top 10 James Woods movies. Pretty good, right?
I think it might be my favorite James Woods movie, to be honest. No, I can't say
No,
that.
it's not.
I can't say that. I can't say
James
that.
Woods movie unless
I
you
can't say that.
have a real bone to pick with Sergio Leone or Oliver Stone or the other great directors that he's worked with.
I mean, yeah, there are definitely better James Woods movies out there. Once Upon a Time in America is I'd probably say my favorite. Yeah.
Yeah. I need to rewatch Videodrome. I feel like that's something that really defined James Woods for a lot of people and warmed up genre fans to him for a long time. The weird thing about me is that I love The Fly, but I can't bring myself to love Cronenberg's other work as much. I'm a bit of a,
I get it.
That's the only one that's really connected with me so far. But yeah, I mean, vampire movies, I've never even tried to list that because, they're just like, that's like, now it's like your top 10 types of concrete, That sounded really bad. What I'm saying is like, these are building blocks to entertainment. Like a vampire is like a tool of some kind to me. It's like a great vampire movie will always be a great movie that has vampires in it. I think it's not like a werewolf where like, man, that was a fucking cool werewolf. Thumbs up, 3 stars.
Yeah.
But that's my case for the Wolfman remake. I thought the werewolf design and the transformation scenes, the action was really cool. That made the movie for me. Vampires don't get that kind of pass.
So you'd say it sounded like you said your favorite was what is your favorite? I forgot what you said there.
Probably Fright Night.
Fright Night? Okay.
And that's a classic story of of murder and intrigue. It's a vampire retelling of Rear Window, basically.
Fair point.
Yeah.
Fair point. Happy to hear it. Okay. I think that about settles it. I think we can get into our final verdicts here. Reminder for our audience, this movie is a 2.9 on Letterboxd out of 5. So, Mr. Tice, you picked this movie, which means you get to decide if you would like to go first here. Are you going to accept or defer your final verdict going first?
I take it to you, Connor, because you've been a bit of a mystery to me, an enigma throughout this. You've been playing this one close to the chest. I need to know.
Well, I've been playing it. It seems like that because I was really undecided for most of this episode. There did come a point where I made up my mind of where I'm going to put this, and I was undecided. And I'll be honest, I was undecided between It's That Bad at a 2.9, fair, or It's Not That Bad. Like, people have beat up on this movie enough. Vampires. Oh man, vampires. Okay. This movie has a lot of entertainment value, and I think it is one that I'm gonna say I do think if you're going through John Carpenter's filmography, like I think this is I wouldn't say essential, but I'd say important. This is an important one to watch, I think. Both from the perception of what it was for so long, kind of the perception that's coming around to be for this movie, which is the growing appreciation for it clearly, and kind of where you would sit on it personally, as a moviegoer, as a John Carpenter fan, if you're that, as a horror fan, if you're that, even like action to a certain extent. I think it would be a good reason to check this out.
That of all the things I would compliment unironically, the action has to be.
Yeah.
The first thing.
Yeah. So I'm gonna say, I made up my mind as I was going. I went into this undecided. I'm gonna say that this movie is not that bad. I think 2.9 is very close to. I would probably give this movie, and I'm probably going to. I didn't previously have it rated on Letterboxd. I'm gonna give it a 3. out of 5. I think that's a very fair rating. I don't know what I'm going to give it score-wise. I usually score a movie out of 100, and I kind of have different categories that fit within each, so I have a more specific feeling about a movie. I don't quite know where I am on that yet, but I think, again, this is a very entertaining movie. I think this is not a so bad it's good. Grab a beer and some popcorn and watch it. But I think this is a very much let's have fun with this. Let's not take it too seriously, but let's marvel at some of the cool stuff they did, some of the things that they really did get right, some of the concepts that maybe they didn't execute that great, but were good ideas. These are things that should be celebrated. And the thing that really did turn the table for me was just contextualizing the movie against how it's looked at. This being having come out in 98, a time that I really, have a hard time looking back at because of all the movies that felt exactly the same within the horror adjacent genres. I appreciate this for feeling like it came out earlier. I appreciate this for the entertainment it does provide, and for that reason, I'm going to stick with not that bad.
Yeah, I can't argue with your logic. I have some more personal sentiments towards it. That
Love to hear it.
While giving my verdict.
Yeah.
I can't watch most John Carpenter movies with my wife. She does not dig the man's style. She doesn't dig his groove. She doesn't even like Halloween.
I respect that, actually.
Yeah, no, she's what we call an independent thinker. She has a PhD to prove it, actually.
I'd like to shake her hand for that, honestly.
Yeah. But while I was away at one point, she told me that she ended up watching vampires, and she actually found amusement out of it.
Ooh.
Because what she does like are the laughable schlocks of the world, right? So
right.
I realized that outside of like a Starman situation, this is a John Carpenter movie I could watch with my wife. I think I could watch with a lot of people because of the entertainment value it offers beyond just the conventions of horror action, right? So I gotta thank this movie for that, and the fact that it really fills that crucial gap in John Carpenter's filmography. I love to see a man who has battled producers and studios for so long just cut back and make a fun monster movie, like one with no pretensions and no concerns other than letting James Woods chew the scenery as delightfully as he does. So I'm gonna say it's an actually good. I will encourage people really appreciate what vampires actually gives us.
Well, there we go, folks. We have an actually good and a not that bad on this show. I like that. I like that we landed on opposing sides, and I sort of figured that you would like this movie more than me, but I didn't know if you would like it enough to go to actually good, which I like that we're there.
I wavered myself between those two camps.
Okay.
I knew that I would not call it that bad. Personal sentiment that is always going to color my viewing or my evaluation, and I've always just been kind of affectionate towards this movie. And I'll be honest, I wish John Carpenter made a lot more movies with this approach, which is ironic because Ghost of Mars is even schlockier, but that's this kind of schlock that kind of despises itself and resents the audience. Like, you dumb buffoons, you showed up to a movie called The Ghosts of Mars. Really? What did you expect? This is a movie that takes that respects. Just started doing my Sean Connery impression. That respects schlock, and thank God is what I say.
You know what? I'm happy to see appreciation for this movie represented on this show. And moving forward, I think that's a good thing that we covered this. If not, to put a little bit more positivity into the pot for the movie. So there we are, folks. That's been John Carpenter's Vampires. Fun episode. I like that Gabe brought this to threw this up for the show. I was worried when I first heard it. I thought, I haven't seen this movie in a while, and I don't know that I remember enjoying it too much. So let's see how this goes. And I'm glad we covered it here today. So, folks, if you liked this conversation, or maybe you hated this one, but you liked another one we had, you got the chance to take our relationship, your relationship with Not That Bad, to the next level. What I mean by that is give us your money. You can log on to patreon.com/notthatbad if you'd like, and pledge any amount to us. We have several tiers, all of which receive nice little goodies, but if you subscribe at a certain tier or higher, you actually get a free Not That Bad sticker. You can put it on your car, which there is actually a car on the road with a Not That Bad sticker on it, and no, it is not mine, and no, it is not Gabe's. I don't know. Maybe Gabe's got it on his car. Anyway,
I would not sully my with that logo.
With our awfulness. Yeah, it would probably break my back window. But yes, you can support us on there. We have we have exclusives that go to our Patreon that you can check out. That's my favorite perk about our Patreon, some of which we release from the Patreon vault onto our YouTube. Definitely not when we have scheduling conflicts. But the rest of them are exclusive to Patreon. There are episodes on there that nobody else's eyes have seen, covering movies like Santa's Sleigh, Mortal Kombat from 1995, and several other goodies that have already come and that are going to come in the future. But it's not the only place you can support us if you want to support us. Of course, as Gabe knows, liking, commenting, subscribing, sharing, following, all of these things help us out. And if you want an easy and convenient place to find all of our episodes and support us the best way that you can do that at our website. Totally free to enter at all times. We will never make you pay to go to our shitty site. NotThatBadPod.com. Bios about your two favorite bad take artists here, as well as a background of all of the episodes that we've covered from season 1 to season 2, organized nice and great for you on the website in order of release, and available in the best platform possible. So there are episodes that are audio only. You will be directed directly to our Spotify page. And you can find our episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everywhere you find them. So definitely seek out the show and support us if you'd like, and you like our content. For now, I think that's all I got to shill. I think I'm done whoring ourselves out. I have bent over enough. Sir Tice, anything else you'd like to say before you take us out?
I'm not following that act. So I'm going to take us out. Thanks, everybody, for checking out another episode, Not That Bad. And who knows, maybe next time you see from us, maybe it won't be Not That Bad. Maybe. It could be, I don't know. I don't know what it could be, but it could be.
It could be something else, I'm telling you.
Else. What variations of badness could we be tackling? I don't know. We'll see.
Ooh, maybe he lives next door to you.
So that's it for this episode, y'all. I'm Gabe.
I am Connor.
And this is Not That Bad asking, did you guys get any mahogany from that? All right.